Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and today we're continuing the top 100 board games of all time, numbers 20 through 11. These games are all rated 10s, which means they are outstanding games. I always want to play them, and I don't see that changing in the future. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. Let's talk about some 10-rated games, starting with number 20. Before we start the list, I do want to mention the hidden movement game, Mind Management. I rate this a 9, which means it's an amazing game that I always want to play, and it's one I've been thinking a lot about recently, but it's a new arrival, so it missed the top 100 this year. But it should be somewhere on this top 100 list, and I wanted to mention it briefly here. It's an incredible hidden movement game that has a lot of scaling with the different shift system packages, but the core system itself is so solid in its objective-driven way. Incredible experience. If you have a chance, please give this one a try. That is Mind Management. Without further ado, let's get started with the list with number 20. My number 20 goes to the game Terra Mystica, where you play as a fantasy race terraforming the land in order to develop and build your civilization. There are so many cool different things happening in this engine building system, and the first thing I want to talk about, one of my favorite things, has to be just the board itself. There's a lot of interaction that comes in building around the different players, because the more you build next to your opponents, you're actually going to be helping out each other. Every time you do so, you're going to generate the power resource, so there's actually good reasons to build next to each other. But it's very risky, because if you do, you could be taking each other's spots and helping each other in a way that you don't really want to. There's a great amount of interaction here with the spaces, the tension on who's going to be able to go to which spaces first, and the shared cooperation of that power resource. In addition, the timing of this game is wonderful. You take a single action on your turn, and you have a variety of options to choose from. Do you spend this upgrading a different building? Do you take one of the available power actions at a discounted rate? Or do you wait some time and see if you can eke out a couple of actions first? I love how quick the turns are, but how tense and difficult these decisions can be. Another thing I really love is the planning. You have these different buildings that you're putting on the board, and they're going to be developing your own personal player board. You're going to be having to figure out which buildings you want to bring out, which paths you want to take, and straight from the beginning, there will be a lot of objectives that are face up. And so when you take your initial faction, you'll be bidding some victory points for it. You really want to prioritize specific abilities, maybe colors, or different things that are going to play into the different conditions. I love that your planning starts from turn 1 and before the game even begins, even with that drafting of the initial factions, as well as placement on the board. I love how you have to consider where your opponents are going to be, where you're going to be, and what upgrade paths you're going to be taking based on the round bonuses as well as the endgame bonuses. There are so many mechanisms in Terra Mystica that all combine to form an amazing package. So that is Terra Mystica, my number 20. My number 19, number 15 last year goes to A Feast for Odin, a worker placement game where you play as Vikings. You'll be taking your set amount of workers each round, using them to take different actions, and gathering stuff. With all this stuff, you'll need places to put it, whether it be on your home board or on other islands that you'll be exploring. Now, one thing I really love is those islands that you'll be exploring. Based on the tile that you take, you'll have these bonus symbols that you can cover. When they're completely surrounded, you'll get additional passive income at the end of every round. And I love this. There's a lot of risk to this because a lot of these will come with a lot of negative points attached. And it's going to take some time to actually grab them. But the earlier you get them, the more that payoff is going to be. And I love this system. You'll be able to do a lot of unique things like getting new sheds or getting more pieces to help you fill in everything else. I love this system, and it feels great when you're able to get just additional stuff during those bonus phases. Amazing. The other thing I really like about this game is the occupation cards. Similarly to the islands, these occupation cards will give you some passive bonuses when you take specific actions. During the Norwegian expansion, you'll be being able to play a lot more of these as well as draw a lot more of these, so you've got some great choices when it comes to building out your options. And the last thing that I want to mention here is the worker scaling. At the start of the game, you start with 6 workers, and each of these spaces is going to require a certain amount to activate. I love how these spaces are organized, and I love how the board works. The weaker actions cost less workers, but they're weaker. But the higher actions here cost a lot of workers, but give you so many different things you can do. And I think it's done extremely well. And they're all very similar in what they do, just that level is scale. And I love that in the game, you're going to be getting workers every round. You're not going to have to waste your time making new workers. You're focused on the actions you're taking and allocating your limited amount every single round to take specific actions. I love this tension and how you may want to take a weaker action somewhere and a stronger action somewhere else, but you have to prioritize which you're going to do based on that finite pool of workers. It's such a great system. It's so clean in the way it's done, and it's extremely satisfying to play as you put out workers, collect resources, fill out bonuses, and then get all those resources every single round by following those paths that you've created with your occupation cards. Amazing, incredible system. This is a feast for Odin, my number 19. My number 18 goes to Underwater Cities. Number 10 last year. This is an engine building game where you are creating a civilization underwater. You can no longer populate the surface. It's filled with people, so you need to dive. Underwater, you'll be creating cities, different production buildings, and playing a variety of cards to get a lot of bonuses throughout the game. One of my favorite parts about this game is just the worker placement itself. Whenever you visit a spot on the board, you're going to get an action of some power level. The orange actions are extremely strong, reds are okay, and then greens are pretty weak. But you also get to play a card that matches the color of the action space you go to. And I love this system because the cards work inversely. The green cards are incredible, and the orange cards stink. The red cards are just okay, and I love this system because you're constantly balancing between the cards in your hand and the spaces that are available on the table. This is extremely satisfying because at the end of every round, you're going to be drawing a new card into your hand. So you're consistently getting these powerful action cards in your hand and being able to figure out where you want to play them on the board. This really differentiates it from other games because you're consistently drawing and you consistently have fresh options. And the cards themselves have a variety of actions tied to them, with endgame scoring, passive bonuses, or action cards that you can use by visiting other spaces. There's a lot to love here with the different card worker combos, as well as that hand management with trying to keep maybe different colors in your hand or trying to visit specific regions. I love that you have that consistent card draw, and I just really enjoy the entire engine building. And when you get into that production phase and you're able to receive all these resources, I think you may notice a trend here with just the satisfaction that comes from building up these engines and receiving a variety of resources. So I really enjoy this system, especially the card play and just the consistent draw that comes with it. So Underwater Cities, an extremely amazing experience, multiplayer or solo, wonderful game. That is my number 18, Underwater Cities. My number 17, 42 last year, is Deception Murder in Hong Kong, the best social deduction game. This has you playing as detectives in Hong Kong. One of your fellow police officers has died, and one of you in the room has done it. It's up to the forensic scientist to give clues about the location, how the murder happened, to help suss out the suspect. Now, right off the bat, this game gives you an arc throughout the game. The forensic scientist is going to be putting out these clues and giving one piece of information on each clue. It's up to everybody at the table to interpret this clue, try to figure out the story that the forensic scientist is trying to tell, and do so by actually having something to accuse on. There are all of these items, evidence, as well as murder weapons that are in front of each player, and they are the potential murder weapons and evidence left at the scene of the crime. It's up to the forensic scientist to help tell that murderer's story and say, hey, it was this lollipop with the alcohol. And I love that it's up to them and up to the players to determine what the relationship between the clues and these items are. It is so well done in providing immediate things that you can talk about. From that initial clue, once that first piece is placed, you have something that's going to guide the conversation, something to guide your accusations. There's none of this weird, awkward, I'm telling you you're the person that is lying because I think it's just how I feel right now. No, you actually have evidence-based accusations that you can lead to. And I love the arc that the game progresses in. You're able to put out all these clues, and then you're able to get rid of some clues and play some new ones. There are also some events that'll get thrown into the deck, and whoa, this just brings up a bunch of amazing conversation pieces. So with the arc, the immediate accusation that you can jump into, and just the conversation pieces that develop throughout the game, as well as the unique and interesting roles with higher player counts, Deception Murder in Hong Kong is the best social deduction experience. I love the theming, I love the presentation, incredible game. That is my number 17, Deception Murder in Hong Kong. My number 16 is going to the game Sleeping Gods. This is a surprise adventure exploration hit from 2021. This has you taking control of the Manticore, a steamship with a gigantic crew and cast of members as you go from day to day exploring the wandering sea. Your goal is to find as many totems as possible, and when you find them, hopefully use them to get your way home. I love the system here, how simple the flow is. On your turn, you'll be taking one ship action. You'll have this little worker, you'll do something, get some action points that you can use for activating future actions. You resolve an event card, and then you go into the action step. You'll take two actions, whether it be moving on this large map, whether it be going to the market, or going to the port and healing, or getting new equipment, or exploring the area. And the main action you're going to be doing is exploring. There are all these little icons on the board that'll have ways that you can interact, and I love the way that this is done. There is a narrative that works extremely well, and the cycle of the game, the travel, move, event, worker space, it just works extremely well. Another thing that I really love about this game are the items. As you play, you're going to be finding a variety of items, and you'll be able to use them through the command that you're acquiring. These commands stay on the items until you clear them in a future ship action phase. So I love that you have this limited use of items, but you're going to be wanting to use them because they are very powerful. Another cool thing with the items is you start with only like 3 items, but as you play the game, you'll be finding new ones and placing them in this large tableau in front of you. At the end of the game, you might have like 50, 60, 70 items in front of you, but because of the way that the information has been trickled to you and that you've been progressively getting them, you're going to be really familiar with all these items, and it feels extremely satisfying. I also really enjoy the combat in this game, how you're going to be allocating these puzzle piece styles and prioritizing specific bonuses or specific abilities that the creatures have when you take them out, but every game is tense, and the greatest driving force about all this is your limited time resource. You only get to run through that event deck 3 times, and you have that limited amount of time to find those totems. So it's up to you to explore, to find those totems in that finite amount of time, and prioritize what you need to get done. But with that time, you also have a lot of freedom to explore whatever you want. If you find something you want to chase down, a lead that you think is interesting, you have the freedom and the control to do so. This game gives you the reins to explore, and it is the best in its genre. That is my number 16. Number 22 last year, that is Sleeping Gods. Incredible narrative experience. My number 15, number 11 last year goes to Camel Up. This has you playing as camel racers, spectators to races, and doing your best to make the most money by predicting correctly who's going to win each leg of the race, as well as the race as a whole. Now, there's a lot to love in Camel Up, but my favorite thing here is the information versus the risk, and this permeates the entire experience. During the game, one of the actions you can take is just to bet on the leg of the race. Who do you think is going to win when 5 dice have come out? And I love this aspect because there are so many things that can happen in here, and that has to do with the way the camels move. Whenever a camel's die is moved, they go from 1 to 3, but if there's something on top of the camel, they move with that camel. So if blue moved 1 here, it would carry yellow with it, and whoever's on the top of the stack is winning. This can cause for some insane plays. What if yellow moves first 1 space, and then blue moves 1 space and jumps on top of yellow, and then purple moves and jumps on top of red? All of a sudden, you went from blue being in 4th place to blue winning the race all of a sudden. There are so many cool, drastic things that can happen because of this randomness, but it's up to you when you want to take those risks. Do you take a bet right away to gain as much money as possible if you're correct, or do you get some information and roll those dice, but give that option to others first before you can take another bet yourself? I love this timing, this choice, but I also love how you can modify this randomness through the use of your oasis and your desert tiles. There are applause and booing in the new edition, but they are going to modify what the different camels do if they land on it. If they land on a booing tile, they go back a space. If they land on the applause tile, they go forward a space. So you can modify and control this randomness where otherwise you may have been stuck with some poor rolls. And I love how you can fix those odds based on the decisions you've made. There's so many great things here. The timing is very important with the small actions that you get, but you always have those choices at your fingertips, and this game leads to some uproaring moments with just the way that the camels move and how you can get invested in these pieces that you are not controlling. I love Camel Up 2nd Edition. It plays extremely high player counts, it's extremely approachable, and it does what it does so well. That timing versus risk versus information. I love Camel Up 2nd Edition. Incredible game. My number 15. My number 14, number 24 last year goes to Keyflower, a game of worker placement and auctioning where you play as settlers. A bunch of new workers are coming in on ships, and it's up to you to auction for new tiles to add to your town, as well as use these workers to trigger the different effects in front of you. Now, this game features 2 very simple actions. On your turn, you either use a worker to trigger a space, or you will be auctioning for a new space that you can add to your city at the end of the round. The last action you can do is pass, and this is the core of the game. On your turn, you have that simple choice. You auction or you use an action. But the terrifying nature of this game is that every single action is always available. It doesn't matter where it is, if it's up for auction, if it's in someone else's city, if it's in front of you, you can do anything you want on your turn, and this feeds into the tension and the timing. And I love this aspect. If you use your own spaces, excellent. You're going to get those workers at the end of the round and you'll be able to use them again. But if you use somebody else's, they're going to get those workers that you used. However, if you use somebody else's spaces, they're prevented from actually using that space. Or based on the color, they're locked into using a specific color to use those spaces. This all access here is such a great feature to the game, and it's absolutely terrifying, and I love it. In addition, I love that the way you're going to be adding new tiles to your table. If you're bidding on a specific tile, you'll add it to your board, and then if there are any workers that were used to activate it, you get those workers back. And at the end of the game, in the last round, the tiles you actually put out are given to you at the start of the game, and these are endgame scoring tiles. You may get points for having a specific color. You may get points for having specific types of resources, and no one knows except you. So the tiles you'll be activating throughout the game are based on these tiles that you're taking at the beginning. But you can anticipate what people are taking, what people are preparing for, and when all of those tiles are revealed at the end, you have to actually win them in auctions to actually score for them. I love this fear, this tension, this prediction aspect, and this prioritization of specific scoring criteria, and just your action selection systems as a whole. There's so many great things that feed into this risk, and the tension that it produces is incredible. Keyflower is a game that offers so much freedom in simple choices, but amazing consequences for small actions. I love Keyflower, my number 14. My number 13 goes to Glory to Rome, a card-based engine building game where you're going to be building different buildings, getting special abilities, and obtaining influence, all for the glory of Rome. Now, the core premise of this game has you taking simple actions and being able to follow other people's actions. When it's your turn, you either play a card for its ability or you think. And thinking is one of my favorite parts about this game. Whenever you take a think action, you get to draw cards. You either draw up to your hand size of 5, take a wild joker into your hand that you can use as any roll, or you draw a single card from the top of the deck. Such a simple action, but it's one that you're going to be taking a lot. And after you play a regular card instead, if you don't want to think, everybody else at the table has the option to follow that action. And this is so satisfying because they can discard a matching card in order to take the action, 3 of a kind to take the action, a jack to take the action, or they can think. That means that everybody's turn, you are going to be doing something. You're either following the action and doing what you want to do, or you're drawing a bunch of cards, and that is super nice. You always have options, you're always propelling yourself forward, and you're always moving towards your goals, which come in the form of these cards. I love the escalation that happens in this game because in addition to following normally by either thinking or playing a card to match, you're also going to be adding clientele to your board. And these clientele allow you to take additional copies of this action. And I love this system because you can pick and choose what actions that you want to strengthen based on the clientele you take. And I love that you also have the option before those clienteles kick in to follow or think. So you can draw a bunch of cards, then follow with the clientele that you've accumulated. There's so many great decisions and choices here. Now, the other thing I really love about this system is the way that the cards work. After you play a card and do its action, it goes into the center of the table and it becomes resources for the other players to use. Whether they're going to add it to their clientele or use it as building materials in their stockpile, there are so many great things that happen, and I love how it all feeds into itself. There's a great loop here where you play a card, goes to the center, goes to your stockpile, goes into a building. It's such a clean system. I love the way it works. And the last thing that I want to briefly mention here is the way that you win the game. The game is over when a bunch of buildings have been made, the deck runs out, or one of the instant win conditions happens. There are so many different things to think about while you play, and some come in the form of instant win conditions. For example, one game that I played recently, I just needed to have 6 different colors in my clientele, but I had to prioritize doing that, which meant the other players at the table could figure out ways to either take the things, the resources in the center, to prevent me from adding them to clientele. I had to spend time actually building the building. So there's a lot of things that you have to think about and work around to make these win conditions work. But the fact that they exist adds a great dynamic to the game and a lot of tension. There are so many unique abilities and powers in this giant deck of cards, and the rate at which you're consistently drawing them, you can really pick and choose the things that you want to prioritize. I love the system. I love the way that it works and how it all feeds into each other. And I love the nature of adding these new wrenches and new plans and ploys with the abilities of these instant win conditions. An incredible engine building system that is going to have you consistently engaged and taking satisfying actions through drawing cards or following. I love Glory to Rome, my number 13. My number 12 goes to the auctioning game For Sale, where you play as realtors doing your best to generate money by buying houses for cheap and then flipping them and selling them for high values. And this game features 2 phases, and that's one of my favorite parts. In the first phase, you're going to be using your coins to acquire houses. And these houses are from values 1 to 30. However, based on the player count, there's some uncertainty as to whether those cards actually exist, and I really enjoy this. Are you actually bidding for the highest number card, or are you bidding for the second highest? Who knows? And I love that aspect about this. In addition, I really enjoy the auctioning system itself. When it's your turn, you either outbid the previous person or you take the lowest card. And I love that option. You're always bidding for the best thing. However, if you've already committed money when you drop out, you lose some of that money, half of the money when you drop out. And that is significant. When is the best time to bid? When is the best time to stay out? How big is that consequence going to be if you take that lowest card? How big of an advantage is that going to give the person to your left? There are a lot of options you have to consider here when it comes to that. In the second half of the game, you'll be using the houses, placing them face down and revealing them. Whoever's revealed the highest number will take the highest value that's in the center. And I love this system because based on those flops, based on the amount of variety in the center, some of these cards are going to be pretty powerful in certain situations. For example, if you have a difference like this where the loser gets 0 and the first place gets 10, you may want to bid a pretty high value because that difference is pretty wide. Every single dollar matters here, and every decision you make carries forward. You have a limited amount of houses that you can use, and everybody knows the houses that you've played based on what happened in the first half of the game. I love this system. I love the 2 of the auctioning. I love the timing that comes into playing these cards, whether it be the auctioning in the first part or in the second part with getting the values. And I love the prediction and uncertainty that comes from reading what your opponents will do based on the different values that appear. There's a lot to love here, a lot of great decisions in such a small space, and this is a game that you can teach to anyone. It's one that is fun and satisfying for all player accounts, and it feels great when you're adding up those values at the end based on clever choices that you've made throughout the process. So that is my number 12. Number 16 last year, this is For Sale. My number 11, number 12 last year goes to Gaia Project. Now this is the sequel to a game that already appeared on this list, Terra Mystica, but this is the sci-fi version, but it still carries over a lot of the same things that makes Terra Mystica so incredible. It has the timing, it has the asymmetry, it has the planning, but it also has some other things that elevate it above the original Terra Mystica design, in my opinion. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is the asymmetry with the factions. The asymmetry here allows you to use the new mechanisms in the game and integrates them in very unique and interesting ways, with the new Gaia forming action, as well as the federations, and the next thing I want to talk about, the tech track. And that is the biggest thing that I think really differentiates this game, and that is how the tech track here is integral and just tied to every single thing and every single decision you make. At the start of the game, you're going to randomly assign these tech tiles onto the board, and they are attached to specific tracks. Now, when you're creating specific buildings, you're going to be taking tiles that are tied to specific bonuses. And I love this. You're just getting more bonuses, more actions, and more development when you're developing your different characters and your different civilizations. This is so well done, and I love how it is also randomized and adds a new variance at the game's start. In addition, you also have some new tracks that are tied to existing actions and some new developments. The first thing that I want to talk about here are the carryover tracks from the original game. The first one here is terraforming and range. These exist in the original Terra Mystica, but here they are clean, they make sense, and they offer you immediate bonuses in addition to permanent passive effects. The other thing I want to talk about are some new actions. You have Gaia forming tracks that allow you the ability to take control of a unique type of planet with a delayed gratification, which I think is so well done. It allows you to use your power in more flexible ways. You also have the ability to get back power by going up further on that track. You also have economy tracks, which just give you more resources, which is great if you're trying to go heavy into that aspect. And then you also have some flexibility in the knowledge track, which allows you to just go up on the other tracks. It's amazing how many options are available here and how you can really dive into the specific aspects that are present. And the last track here is a very interesting one. This is the QIC track, which offers you this very powerful resource for extremely swingy turns and powerful moves and plays in the form of getting extra range, Gaia forming planets for free, or going for this special option over here by spending QICs for incredibly strong actions. You can get tech tiles, you can trigger your scoring tiles again for completing federations. Oh my gosh, there are so many choices. This tech track I could probably sit and talk about all day, but everything from Terra Mystica carries over to this game, but offers huge amounts of replayability and just so many clever, streamlined things in the form of this tech track that I think are worth exploring. If you enjoy the gameplay and the engine building of systems where you're putting out pieces on a board and watching your civilization grow while being aware of the enemies and the opponents and the actions that they are taking, you need to play Gaia Project. Incredibly satisfying. The planning, the timing, the asymmetry, the tracks, and just the bonuses and the passive quick actions that you'll be taking as you play. I love Gaia Project. I think it's an incredible system, incredible game. That is my number 11. And that's the list. Those are my top 100 board games of all time, numbers 20 through 11, the 2022 edition. What did you think of the games on this list? Any surprises? Any games that you think should be higher? Anything that should be lower? Anything that I haven't mentioned yet or that you're excited to see potentially on my next list? We're getting close. We're almost at the top 10. Thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.